Hello guys, it's our second part with Professor Mike McNamee, University Swansea, Wales, United Kingdom. And Professor, good afternoon again. And my first question is about university. How did they find you? So how did you come up to work here? And probably which advices you can give to university, like how this program could be upgraded, because it's quite young program and every year there is new things and something changed.
How did they find me? Well, that's a question I think you have to ask them. I can say that obviously I'm quite a well-known scholar. I was president of the International Association for the Philosophy of Sport. I pioneered for the last 25 years sports ethics. I'm the editor of Sport Ethics and Philosophy. I have a book series with Routledge, Ethics and Sports, which has over 30 books in it. So I helped to create this field, I suppose. That's probably why they asked me to come. But the field of ethics and sports is evolving. It too is a reasonably new field. One of the most interesting developments that I've helped to bring about over the last decade, I would say, is to bring the skills of the philosopher into questions not merely about the nature and goodness of sport, right conduct, wrong conduct, doping and commercialization, exploitation, so on, but to also bring it toward policy development. Not just saying what's good, right, wrong, bad, but actually creating change within the sports organizations. So one of the things that I've tried to do here is to bring that ethical lens and the toolkit that philosophers have to analyze particular practices and cultures in sport and to rigorously and systematically examine them according to ethical theoretical positions, not just vague intuitions or subjective beliefs or positions of power, because ethics is not reducible to these things. I should also say that I developed my own master degree with 6 countries in Europe in sport ethics and integrity. It's a new program funded by the Erasmus Mundus program of the European Commission, because I think what's needed and what's going to happen in the world of sport now is I think we're going to get the development of sports ethics and integrity officers, particular people who are going to lead reform and change in organizations. Now, this particular course, the Masters of Sports Administration, I think has a more overarching role, because you're being taught various administrative theories, governance theories, theories of marketing and sponsorship and so forth. So I think this course is designed specifically for leaders in sport, and leaders really must be critically informed about ethical issues. So I guess one of the reasons why I'm asked is to do this, and I'm not sure that I'm the best person to say how it's going to develop. Let's see. It's only a few years old. I think what has to happen now is you have to probably go through a period of 3 to 5 years. The alumni have to go out into the field and make a change. And really, I think what has to happen is there has to be a kind of feedback loop. So the first, second, third cohorts have to get into work, and then they have to struggle with work about moving into these new institutions. But in a way, they've got to come back and say, do you know what? We really should have learned more about this, or we didn't know anything about that. So in a way, perhaps it's not down to me to say how it's going to develop. I think partly it's going to be down to the leaders of the program and the professors, but crucially the students, to create the last part of that feedback loop, to come back and say, yeah, this was great, that worked really well, we want more of this, that didn't really work. But you know, I would always say this, students are the ones you've got to look to for feedback in any educational course, but are they always right? No. See, you might say to me, Alex, you say, yeah, that was quite a good course, but this stuff, that was just too difficult. Who says it's too difficult, you or me? Yeah.
Could be for me difficult.
Maybe it's difficult for you. Maybe I say that's the right standard. So I think part of a master's course like this, I think part of its quality has to be assured intellectually by your professors and so forth. But part of it has to be assured by the students in the market because it's a vocational course. You're trying not just to educate people, you're trying to train them as well to do these jobs better. So for me, this is a really exciting degree. It's right at the beginning. I wonder what the sports world think of it. Because before, people would learn on the job. You know, how would you learn to be an expert sports administrator? Well, you'd spend a lot of time in a sports organisation, which is a good way of doing things, but it's not necessarily the best. Because what do? You end up repeating the behaviours, replicating the policies. In a way, you have a chance here to come to find out from international experts how things are done best around the world. So, and I think that's a good model. I think that internationalization is a really important point. How to make it better? Well, let's see what the sports world says about it. Let's see what alumni say after they've tried to put this into practice.
Let me come more to your personality. We had a question during this week. What are our basic principles we could never deny, we will always stand for? Do you have these principles, and probably do you have any philosophy? So as far as you philosopher, probably have you any personal philosophy?
Let's answer the second question first. Broadly speaking in ethics, broadly speaking, I follow Aristotle, who says that ethics is essentially about wise and good people. Because I follow him, I find it very hard to identify a single principle. There is nothing more important than a good character. That'll do for me.
Probably a way of life, or it's not more about philosophy.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be put into a corner and said, what's your most important principle? Be a good person is my most important principle, but that's not really a principle. But certainly, as you will find, the further you go up in an organization, the more that's going to be a challenge. When you have no money, it's going to be very difficult to use your money badly. Yeah, when you have lots, now the challenge is much deeper, much more powerful. So I think what Aristotle says, he says, emulate the phronimos. Try to copy the wise chooser. And in a way, that's not for me to supply. In a way, I think for that to mean something, you have to choose it. Everybody has to choose it for themselves. And I think that's a really good piece of advice for young people going out into the world of sports administration, because you have policies and procedures and so forth. But what you've got to do is you've got to find yourself a really good person in that organization, one who you can see straight away as a good person, whose judgment you're going to trust. And I find, although institutions try to have formal systems for mentoring, I suspect it's very often the informal ones where you choose the person you think is really going to help you to get through. But then it really matters who you choose, because if you choose the bad guy or the bad girl, then that's how your behavior is going to go.
And as far as you said about the career development, and it's one of the questions we discussed a lot, and it's still it's from ancient time, it's always eggshell, it's corruption. And probably you can give some advices for us because we will go to work in sport organizations. First, if we see the case of corruption, how it's better to behave. And the second case, if somebody asked us about corruption, like from ethical point of view, or probably you will say that it's a moral decision of every person and there is no such kind of roadmap.
Well, it's not so easy to answer. Let's begin by saying this. In most cases, you might say, it's really easy to work out what you should do, right? Somebody offers you a bribe. You don't need to think, is this the right thing or the wrong thing? You know very quickly this is the wrong thing. So very often the difficulty is not a kind of, I want to say, epistemic difficulty. It's not a difficulty of knowing what's the right thing. The difficulty is psychological. How can I bring myself to do it? But if you're working in an organization with good standards and good policies, practices and culture, it should be much easier because you will find support, implicit, explicit, organizational and personal. You'll find support to say, somebody wants me to do this, you know, this isn't right. How can I navigate the situation? That's where having this wise, trusted person, usually higher in the organization because they've been around longer, they've had experience of how to navigate these issues. That's where that's going to help. Where it's going to become challenging, for example, is in the borderlands. You know, my boss asked me to sit on an interview. There's 3 people for the job. One of them is his nephew. And he says, I can't be on the interview panel. I have a conflict of interest. So you lead the panel, and by the way, make sure you appoint so-and-so. Now we're in a really awkward situation. So one of the things is, of course, what kind of relationships do you have with this person? Clearly, you're in a disempowered position. Can you really challenge this person? Yes, you can, but it's going to be very, very hard. Maybe you're not going to have a future in this organization. Who else can you go to? Are there other policies you can refer to and say, look, this is what you're asking me, but this is what our own organizational rules say. You can't ask me to break those rules, can you? Put it in an email. Put it in writing. Cover yourself, because you want to do the right thing. But of course, there are some situations you find yourself in that you can't do the right thing.
Then drop off?
Well, that's your choice now. You know, do you see yourself working in this organization? Do you have other alternatives? Should you step aside? Do you have a whistleblowing policy? Should you blow the whistle inside the organization? Will anybody listen? Should you blow the whistle outside the organization? Because whistleblowing is tough. Everybody loses when you blow the whistle, including you, the whistleblower. So usually that's the last resort. But back to structures and cultures. Usually people don't want to do these kinds of things in the light of day. They will call you secretly, but they'll keep it disclosed. How can you bring it into the light in ways that protect you? That's not a good answer. Sorry.
Anyway, it's interesting. Thank you. Okay, let's go from this hot topic to more soft. So philosophy means it's love of wisdom, and I wanted to ask you, like, how many hours during the day you can think, like, because it takes an energy, and probably also the second question, you can suggest us some exercises for mind, like for logic, which will help us in the future when there is always time limitations for taking decisions.
Yeah, I don't know. When I was doing my PhD, maybe 30 years ago now, I didn't think I could work for more than 4 or 5 hours a day seriously. But you know, people do this in different kinds of ways, don't they? Some people say, I think very well in the morning, so I put the heavy work in the morning. I do the emails in the afternoon. Some people are the opposite. I'm a lark. I'm always up early working. I can't work late at night. I'm in bed, 10 o'clock. Good night. But other people it's different. So I don't think there are any universal rules here. But what I know is people can't think for long unless they're very well trained to do it. But then it is a matter of habituation. It's a matter of habits. You know, so maybe if I'm sitting in an economics course or something, maybe I'm asleep in 20 minutes. I don't know. If there's lots of numbers, I'm in trouble. Maybe the economist can't sit and listen to a philosophical argument for 20 minutes. But me, I'm trained to do that, so I can do it for hours, no problem. Good exercises. Yeah, I don't know. Go and argue with clever people, that'll do.
Okay, so it makes sense. Yeah. And probably about the first part, about thinking, is it difficult for you to stop thinking? Like, because, you know, in our imagination, it's not difficult. Ah, really? It's not possible.
It's impossible. Okay. I'm afraid it's like a second skin.
Okay, it's interesting.
I'm not sure I can. You can't use a metaphor like a coat, because you can take off your coat. I'm not sure I can unphilosophize
there is
what the verb is.
Which stops you from thinking? Really? It's interesting.
That's a different question. I'll tell you what stops me thinking. Going to play golf. Well, go play golf, or maybe no tennis, no. Golf, because I'm not very good. All you can worry about is the ball, the swing, the wind, the green, the terrain. I'm so focused on all those things I can't think about it. So the world disappears when I go and have a game of golf. But that's a bit like sport anyway, isn't it? I'm not sure it's every sport, because some sports conduce more to reflection. Long distance sports, endurance sports, you find your mind wandering in and out of problems from the day and so forth. If you're doing that when you're playing golf, you're going to have a disaster. If you do that when you're playing ice hockey, you take the stick back as you're about to strike for the goal. You go, well, should I really have done that yesterday? The ball, it's gone. The puck's gone. Yes. So different sports and training for different sports, in a way, they all afford you different kinds of times and spaces and places for reflection. But usually, if you're thinking about what you're doing, you're not doing sport well. In a way, you want to be so trained and habituated that these actions are automated. Yeah, they're non-verbal. You see the pattern, you react.
Okay, now we move to short answers. I will ask you, and you can answer really briefly. So the first question you asked us, it's about the best athlete in the world ever. And why?
It's easy to ask that question, isn't it? God, I honestly don't know.
Okay, you don't have one.
I love Ali. But do I think he's a perfect role model? Absolutely not. But in a way, that makes him almost more attractive, because he's human. Like Gandhi. Unbelievable figure, but he was not a good husband or a father. I mean, he left that side to go. But I'm not sure you can find any single person who's completely good. Maybe you shouldn't even be looking. Even the great people, you think you'll find some flaw in their character. So Ali, despite some of his weaknesses and his indulgences, he was a magnificent athlete.
The best philosopher?
Well, I think the answer to that would be, it depends what branch of philosophy you were talking about, but I suppose most philosophers would say Plato.
The best word in English, so we said we've been talking a lot about the words, so probably you have the favorite one.
My favorite word?
Yeah, probably you like how it sounds.
Oh, propinquity.
Propinquity.
That's a beautiful word. It means the nearness in time. So in the utilitarian theory of ethics, if you're trying to decide whether one course of action is better than another course of action, one of the rational criteria is, well, if this produces this much good, that produces the same amount of good, I'll prefer the one which is nearer in time. So propinquity. Beautiful word.
We'll read it. And now I suggest you to play kind of game. I will give you a term, because so you're a philosopher, you can play with words much better than we, and you have to say in one sentence what does it mean. If it's okay, we can start.
Go on then.
Okay, sport is
good.
Okay, ethics.
Unavoidable.
Tennis.
Did I use beautiful already?
Yes.
Oh, tennis is just a beautiful sport. So, if I'm thinking Federer, I'm thinking elegant.
Rugby.
I love rugby. Rugby, it's a kind of beautiful ugliness. It's a kind of beautiful violence. That's not one word, is it? Do I have to have one? Magnificent.
Philosophy. And the last is, what is the life for you in one word?
A gift.
Thank you, Professor. It was Professor Mike McNamee from University Swansea. And thank you for watching. I hope you also enjoy this interview. And see you later in our other editions. Bye bye, guys.